can I do a little bit of promotional work?
Oh.
Okay.
So I'm doing this series called Boris, available as
You
a
hadn't
podcast on
mentioned it.
BBC Sounds, which is looking at Boris Johnson's life in various chapters. Well, what's amazing is that I could probably start making the next series about the next Prime Minister now, because there are so many amazing archive clips of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, because they've just come of age in an era where everything's filmed all the time.
It is the joy of having like social media and the digital
Yeah.
platforms. We've got all that embarrassing stuff on them.
And it means you can see Liz Truss at a Lib Dem party conference when she was a Lib Dem, very passionately arguing, using some of the weird same little voice tics about abolishing the royal family.
We asked them their opinion of the monarchy. Do you know what they said? They said, abolish them. We've had enough. But believe it or not, conference, they didn't say this once. We met another group of people and another group of people, and all three groups of people said, abolish the monarchy. In fact, conference, we couldn't find a single monarchist outside the Royal Pavilion. How ironic.
That word abolish, you can imagine it in a different context now, using that word and it's sounding just like that with the kind of the intonations of it.
She's been on a journey in her own words. Also, having a much higher voice in their youth is Rishi Sunak, who was in a documentary about social mobility, and this clip just keeps popping up on social media, but you can see why.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are, working class, but I'm not working class, but I mix and match, and then I go to see kids from an inner city state school and tell them, to apply to Oxford and talk to them about people like me, and then I shock them at the end of chatting to them for half an hour and tell them I was at Winchester and one of my best friends is from Eton or whatever, and then they're like, oh, okay.
The thing that makes me laugh the most, though, is from last week's episode of Newscast with Matt Hancock, where he said Rishi Sunak was born in a pharmacy. Oh, yeah. Well, not in a pharmacy, but to some people who would have, he was
the thing is,
born next to the paracetamol.
The next generation of leaders, like beyond the current crop, it's going to be even harder, isn't it? Because, as you say, the flip side to you compiling your documentary and all the rest of it is that there'll be so much stuff. Stuff. People won't have the kind of excuse of having grown up in the pre-YouTube,
but the thing is they'll
era.
be more aware. It's almost like people are aware now that everything you do is recorded, but those clips are still of an age, I think, of where you didn't expect them to be coming up again on Newscast.
Well, let's give the future historians some more footage of us talking on this episode of Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
Hello, it's Alex in the studio.
And it's Chris in the studio. I'm thinking those historians, Adam, are going to think, it's the Fleming, the moustache years, when they go through the archive.
Well, unless I keep it forever.
Well, that would be true.
Are you tempted?
I don't know. I'm tempted to stop talking about it.
Which is why I asked.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what should I do with it over the summer holidays? Well, TV viewers will have to wait till September to find out, because this is our last episode for a few months. So it'll be like full massive beard by then.
Tash.
Very unlikely.
Tash Jeopardy.
So then there were two. I mean, actually, Alex, Penny Mordaunt, as a reporter, you started your career in the south of England, so you must have followed her around for years and years and years and years and years.
Yeah, it's incredible, really, because they always say that when you start off as a kind of baby reporter in your patch, that you need to build your contacts and keep your contacts and all the rest of it, and it kind of pays off one day. Well, I worked at the Portsmouth News as my first political reporting job when Penny Mordaunt was trying to be the MP for Portsmouth North. So she was kind of courting me a bit as one of the political reporters on the local paper. She wanted coverage for her campaign and all the rest of it. So I've known her since then. And it's like this incredible thing when those people that you've sort of gone through your career knowing fairly well through the prism of journalism, suddenly we're in the running to be Prime Minister. It's kind of quite a moment. And you think, my goodness, yeah. So, but not anymore. Obviously, she got booted out. So.
Well, let's talk about the two that did make it. Chris, what are your first impressions of Liz Truss's campaign?
So she was straight out, wasn't she, this morning, doing her first broadcast interview of the campaign, proper interview, as opposed to answering a couple of questions at a launch, talking to Nick Robinson on the Today programme on Radio 4. And I think what's interesting is that she broadened this economic critique. So last couple of weeks she's been gunning for Rishi Sunak on the specifics of tax over the last couple of years. This idea that she cut taxes immediately, he says, wait until inflation comes down. This morning, it was actually a critique about the last 20 years, brackets 12 of which have been under a Conservative government, second set of brackets, she's been in government herself for 10 years.
And actually was at the Treasury.
Yeah, she's
For 2
actually
years.
the Treasury for 2 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But and her argument basically is, look, you've had this, as they see it, mushy consensus for a couple of decades, new Labour-ish, Conservative Lib Dem coalition-ish, and that the Tory tiger hasn't been let out of the cage. Big tax cuts, what people in Westminster call supply-side reforms, in other words, deregulations, getting rid of regulations, making the economy spark more easily. And that's the big pitch that she's making, versus portraying Rishi Sunak as Mr. Business as usual, managerialism, as she put it. He's going to argue, and I think we'll get quite a lot from him in the coming days. Well, hang on a minute. I mean, how do you pay for this? And he says, look, to be Conservative actually is to balance the books. And then also, if you've got promises like sorting out social care in England, well, how are you going to pay for that if you start cutting taxes? So it's fascinating, really, because they're not actually, the two of them, from the opposite wings of the Conservative Party at all.
It's so strange that's how it's been framed.
Yeah.
One's left and one's right. You're like, they're both fairly right.
Yeah. But they're not. You know, if you look at the sort of breadth of view within the Conservative Parliamentary Party, it is a lot wider than those
exactly.
two. But obviously, in a campaign, you emphasise your differences and you paint in primary colours, and that's certainly what Liz Truss is doing.
Let's have a listen to her. This is her speaking to Nick Robinson on the Today programme. That first interview, as Chris mentioned, on Thursday morning.
I think every day when I get up in the morning, what can I do to change things? I'm impelled to do that. I am pretty hardworking, pretty direct, and I will bulldoze through, frankly, the things that need to get done.
Well,
and that is my...
bulldoze, they're saying toughness, they're hearing grit, and they see you dress and model yourself on Margaret Thatcher. Because you're saying to people,
I don't accept that. I am my own person, Nick.
It's just a coincidence
I'm
that
from
you have a series of photographs.
I'm from a very different background. I grew up in Yorkshire. I went to a comprehensive school. I am somebody who has worked all my life to get things done, and that's what I want to do in the job.
Now, Rishi Sunak did day one of the campaign with a video that some people are saying is quite cringy. Other people saying it's quite inspiring. There's lots of sort of...
His background video.
No. I mean the one about him watching the results coming in and then massive fist bumping and being very bro-ish.
And notice the point. What struck me about that was not that he punched the air, because that's a human reaction, but he punched the air when he heard Liz Truss's number.
Ooh,
not
this
when
is expert level analysis.
Not
I didn't even notice.
So you might have thought he would punch the air when the number was read out, 137, I think it was, because that would be proof that he was going to make the final.
Yeah, he's well through. Yeah,
but it wasn't that. It was when he heard Liz Truss's number, which was perhaps a bit lower than some people thought it might have been.
Right.
Or was he happy that he was up against Liz Truss rather than Penny Mordaunt? I mean, you could read that into it.
Could have been that. But that was the point of the raw thing.
And he says, we've exceeded expectations. And I was like, no, I don't think you have, actually. I mean, you did win, but it wasn't hugely convincing.
Well, no, the percentage was pretty low. If you look at the percentage of the party votes that previous prime ministers got, his is kind of fairly low down. And a lot of people expected him to be through sooner, so reach the kind of magic number sooner.
And he says, 4 weeks ago, people had written me out of this. Because, of course, remember 4 weeks ago was the stuff about his wife's tax, his green card. And I'm just thinking to myself, actually, did he genuinely think a month ago, that is it? Or is he just saying that for kind of like redemption, comeback, narrative purposes? Anyway, when he was on Newscast a few weeks ago with Laura, she did ask him about what it means for his family finances being dragged into this. And here's a reminder of what he said.
I think it's totally fine for people to take shots at me. It's fair game. I'm the one sitting here, and that's what I signed up for. It's actually it's very upsetting, and I think wrong for people to try and come at my wife, and beyond that, actually, with regard to my father-in-law, for whom I have nothing but enormous pride and admiration for everything that he's achieved.
And Alex, I imagine your summer is going to be going to lots of hustings and standing in lots of car parks.
You know I love a car park. It's just worth noting that if you think back to the Boris Johnson v Jeremy Hunt contest, people kind of knew the outcome. They went round, they did the same speech pretty much every time. I kind of got to know it off by heart. This time, it feels like this could be a much more open contest. There's a lot of volatility in the members. I think a lot of people are going to be seeing how they perform, what their arguments are. It feels like this could be a more interesting hustings through the summer.
Yeah, because there's loads we just don't know about them. Whole areas of policy where we don't really know. And yeah, they'll probably stay fairly close to the manifesto on which the Conservatives won the last election, but we'll still be asking, what's your instinct on A, B, C, D? There's loads and loads to go at.
On to other things now, and there's going to be another strike on the railways next week because Network Rail still haven't done a deal with the RMT union over paying conditions for people that work on the network, and we can find out how those negotiations are going, or maybe he won't tell us at all because it's top secret, from Mick Lynch, who is the Secretary General of the RMT. Hello, Mick.
Hello there. Yeah, well, there are two sets of negotiations. There's Network Rail, which is the infrastructure provider, and the train operators, which are the people that obviously run the train. So we've got two strands of negotiation. We're always engaged with them today and tomorrow and maybe into eternity, but we are not making very much progress. We clearly understand each other's positions, but the gap is still very wide at this time.
And just in terms of the practicalities, are you just basically locked in an airless room, just kind of sort of shouting at each other?
Well, we're locked in an air-conditioned room. We don't shout at each other. Everybody thinks that people are banging tables and throwing chairs at each other. It's not like that at all. Everyone in these negotiations have known each other for a very long time in the railway industry, so they're quite cordial and professional. But that doesn't mean you agree. So unlike the House of Commons, not everybody's jumping up and down and stamping their feet, but it doesn't mean that you just shake hands and there's a deal. It's a difficult thing to deal with.
And do you ever feel like the power on the other side isn't in the room? In other words, you might be suggesting something, but they can't move. They don't have the power to move.
It's absolutely not in the room. The power with the train operating companies sits directly with the Secretary of State. It's written into their contracts. They have service contracts, and it says that the Secretary of State is directly responsible for industrial relations and has the power to veto any deal. And that's on the public record. It's there for you to look at in their contracts. And he denies that all of the time, but they leave the room, have to adjourn, go and check their mandate. And if it doesn't suit what the powers that be want, there isn't any movement. And at this time, there isn't any movement. So their agenda to shut every ticket office in Britain, to change contracts of employment, a bit like a version of fire and rehire, where virtually all of our members will have to adopt new contracts and sign up to them, is fully there. And it's a complete dilution of everything we've agreed over the decades. And our members simply aren't prepared to accept that. When we sorted out the redundancies and the conditions, then we would move on to pay. But we have to have those two elements sorted out first. So pay is actually at the bottom of our agenda, not at the top, despite what the press tell us.
Well, let's dive into some of the details then, because, yeah, you're right that so much of the focus is on that number about what the pay award would be. So is it true they want to shut every train ticket office in Britain?
Absolutely.
Every single one?
Every single one. They've told me that directly. Transport Focus has issued a list, which is the consultative body, and they want to commence closing them in week beginning October the 2nd. So it's on top of us. There will have to be a public consultation through the train operating companies, but they've already fixed that consultation through the media, saying that ticket offices are worthless, so that there's no hope for them in the future. And the excuse is that they just want to get rid of that overhead, turn them into Costa coffees or whatever, get the rental revenue and leave vulnerable passengers, the disabled and the elderly and others, foreign visitors, without that assistance that they might expect.
Look, you've made the point you're not dinosaurs, but things do move on. And do you need a window at every station? And am I right, and correct me if I'm not, but isn't it right that they have said there'll be no compulsory redundancies in this process? So it's like a modernisation process which might result in jobs losses, but not compulsory ones.
No, they haven't said that at all. That's what we're seeking. So we go into the talks and say we can talk about your modernisation and the changes you want, and we will work with you on that. In return, we want a guarantee of no compulsory redundancy. So you write that on a piece of paper.
I thought they'd said that.
No, they haven't. Network Rail has said if we accept everything that they have proposed, they will consider putting that into the deal. The train operating companies have made no offer at all on redundancies.
The next strike day is next Wednesday, and it's on the eve of the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Why is it okay to muck up the start of the Commonwealth Games?
Well, it's not okay. It's not our aim. But the reason that is on that date, when we got the last letter from the TOCs, the train operating companies, we had to take a decision on that day. And because of the anti-trade union laws, you have to give 14 days notice. The only day outside of the Commonwealth Games that we could put action on is that date. So we've avoided the Commonwealth Games deliberately, but because of Grant Shapps and Rishi Sunak's laws that they keep changing, we have to put it on the 27th of July. That's the only date available.
You know that the strikes have obviously caused a lot of disruption to a lot of ordinary people. A lot of ordinary people are already struggling with things like inflation, cost of living, public transport costs anyway, and then the travel's hugely disrupted. Are you getting a lot of stick for it? Are you getting abuse?
No, it's quite the opposite. On my
None
way
at all?
here, I was stopped by 3 people between Westminster Station and this studio saying, keep on going. We've had a massive response. And I think there's a sea change in the British public about what it's like in the world of work, the vulnerability that people are now suffering from. People get no conditions in a lot of work. They get nothing above statutory minimum. They don't get looked after, and many of them on really poor pay. We're getting a massive response, not only from the travelling public who support us, many of them. On the picket lines, we've had spontaneous demonstrations where I think there were 1,000 people turned up on the picket line at King's Cross on the last Saturday of the action. We're getting a massive response in favour.
That's really interesting, that broader analysis you make about the reaction and perhaps people kind of reimagining the kind of world of work and conditions. Because we've seen, haven't we, historically over the last generation, trade union membership shrivelling, it focused particularly on the public sector. You and fellow union leaders seen as less significant, less important. Do you think that tide is changing?
I can certainly detect a change in sentiment. There are lots of people from different backgrounds that tend to be non-union environments where they're feeling, actually, I don't have any protection in this job. I can be got rid of at any time, and I don't actually get anything apart from my wages. And if there are good times where people are in casualised work or freelancing and that type of work, maybe that's good when there's loads of work around. But I think prices are being driven down, not just against inflation, but in actual cash terms, many prices are being driven down for freelancers. And if you're working in a fulfilment centre, as they're called, in these new warehouse operations where you get nothing at all and you're monitored day and night from the start of the shift to the end without any downtime, you might think, well, maybe I need the protection of a union and some terms and conditions agreements in this job that make my working life better. And I'm definitely detecting a change in the mood amongst working people at this time.
I know that you mentioned where you said that pay wasn't the biggest part of this. You would come to the pay at the end, but it is a part of it, isn't it?
Yes.
And I mean, look, you would have heard the argument, but I want to put it to you because there is the argument from government, there is the argument, certainly when it's come to other areas of public sector pay, that you simply cannot put up wages by the rate of inflation because the rate of inflation is so high and you end up in an inflationary spiral, which makes it worse for everyone and we all live with the pain for longer. You just simply can't have 9.4% pay rises.
Why don't you mention profits and dividends in that? I mean, the only analysis we ever get from the media is that it's workers, often who the lowest paid people in this country, are responsible for inflation. That's patently untrue in this period because the inflation was there before the pay round and it's been building all through the austerity and the public sector pay freeze. And there's a private sector pay freeze as well. So real wages have been in decline for many years, a decade probably.
But I mean, it would be a big hike to go up to 9.4% now.
Well, we need the inflation, RPI, the real measure of inflation, which they want to hide, is 11.8.
Right.
And for the 2 years that they're proposing that we go into a pay deal at the moment, it's likely that inflation would be 20% accumulative across those 2 years. Most of our people haven't had a pay rise for 2 or 3 years. If you're a nurse or a doctor or a care worker or a refuse worker, you may not have had a real terms pay rise for a decade. So it can hardly be true that it's wages that are causing inflation. It's profit taking that's causing inflation because the big corporations are not skimming their profits down and saying, I'll do a redistribution. We actually need to support wages in this economy. And that's what we're faced with. It can't be true that low-paid workers are causing inflation. The problem with low-paid workers is they haven't got enough money, and it needs to be resolved through the pay packet.
Who would you prefer, Prime Minister Sunak or Prime Minister Truss?
Well, I obviously don't want either of them, but I think there's a real danger at the moment, I think, in this Tory contest. I think we've got a hard right cast of people.
Is that a reasonable
I think these are
characterisation?
extremists. These are people that are saying we won't, virtually on the edge of saying that tax itself is abhorrent. And tax is a good thing in a progressive society. Tax is the means by which you create equality. And they are more or less saying to basically...
You must be like a Rishi Sunak man then, because he's the one saying...
Well, Rishi Sunak would get it back. I mean, they never put progressive taxes. Most of the taxes in this country are raised through VAT.
And
he wants to put corporation tax up. He wants to whack the profits of the people you were just complaining about.
Because what you can do about corporation tax, if you want to avoid it, you can reinvest in your workforce and through research and development and retooling your company and creating more workers. That's the whole point of a corporation tax. That you avoid it through a progressive means by saying, I'm going to get loads of apprentices, I'm going to bring in a more diverse workforce, I'm going to create job opportunities. Because then it hits your profits and you only pay tax on the profit.
The thing is that, I mean, you caricature this race as being one where tax is apparently abhorrent. I mean, tax is higher now collectively than it has been in decades and decades and decades. So is government spending by any modern comparison of any political party. That's the sort of thing you'd love if it was delivered by a Labour government.
Tax needs to be high. But what we've got in this country, and this is never remarked on by the media, even yourselves, those of us that are on PAYE cannot avoid tax. We pay it out of our wages every week. There are many, many people in this country avoiding tax like it's some kind of disease.
Now, in this whole process, you've become a bit of a celebrity, maybe even a bit of a pin-up for some people. Has it been quite fun?
No, I mean, my job is to get the job done for my people. My stock apparently is up there on social media. I don't know what half of it is. I'm too old. I never knew what trending was 2 weeks ago.
When you were, I guess.
Still not sure.
Oh, what have you done with your profile photo? Because Piers Morgan complained that you were the baddie from what was it, Captain Scarlet.
International Centre of Evil or something.
Yeah,
I haven't done anything with it. It's still sitting there as a bald man with big eyebrows, which my mates about 8 years ago thought was quite funny, which is when it went up. I suppose you look like the Hood, but I mean, that's the level of journalism we've got in the present company accepted.
What intrigues me here
is it's a different channel. Yeah.
What intrigues me here is that I guess there's two roles for someone like you as a union leader. There's the skill of negotiation and the crucial business of getting a deal for your members, but then particularly around a big high-profile series of strikes, there's the public image stuff and there's the talking to us lot of stuff. I just wonder how you found all of that and this kind of soaring of your own profile. I know it's not about that. Your focus is on your members, but I just wonder personally how you found that.
Well, you just get on with it. I have the Daily Mail outside my house.
Do you? Every day?
In the run-up to the strike, I had my own personal photographer for about a week, following my kids to work, following my wife, phoning relatives in America and all sorts of places. So there's all sorts of shenanigans going on, but you just got to push through. My attitude to all of this is answer the questions as straight as I can in a conversation with you and anyone else. And if they ask dopey questions, I'll tell them it's a dopey question. If they ask me a reasonable question,
we can believe that after the last 10 minutes.
I'll try to give a reasonable answer and engage in what they want to know. But if it's really vapid and stupid, they're going to get treated. It's going to get knocked over the boundary if that's the chance.
Well, so I hope you don't think this is a vapid.
Yeah.
You probably think this is a really vapid question, but I'm just intrigued because of how the media works. Is there something you've had to stop doing in your life because even though you know it's legit, if it got papped and put in the mail, you know that they would misinterpret it and it would harm your cause?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I've got the most boring regulation life. I'm a very traditional person, and I happen to have traditional trade union, old Labour type politics now. Maybe I'm just exceptional because that sort of thing has died out, but I'm hoping to articulate the case on behalf of a bit of fundamental redistribution of wealth and a square deal for working people. I think people have lost a lot of values, and I think the job of the trade unions at the minute is to re-establish some values about things like commonwealth, things like, and I mean the real meaning of commonwealth, things like shared values, shared economy, that the economy itself has got to be shared.
That's the argument your movement's lost, though, isn't it?
It has lost it, but it stopped pursuing it because it lost it in the short term in the late 70s and early 80s, but it's never gone back to it. It's been afraid of itself. Conservatism isn't afraid of its traditional values. And if you take this government now and the candidates, who I think are extreme right-wingers, they would not hesitate to jump on a bit of jingoism and nationalism and anti-migrant feeling, and they do it all of the time, and they would ride that wave as like surfers. What Starmer and others on the front bench have got to do is ride some kind of solidarity wave, and we've got to have a summer of solidarity, I think, about just the word redistribution of wealth. Wealth in this country is too polarised, all right, and there are too many people really struggling.
Obviously, the Conservative leadership candidates would take issue with that idea of being extreme right-wing, but you're actually paying them a compliment, aren't you? You're saying that they have the courage of their own convictions, and too many on your side, on the left, simply don't.
Absolutely. They have the courage of their convictions. But at the moment, they're only playing virtually. We've outsourced this to a Surrey golf club. The people that are going to be voting for our next Prime Minister are people from a very small segment of the population, not just in numbers, but style, character, background, income, belief, and all the rest of it, which I would caricature as the members of the archetypal Surrey Golf Club sitting there in their gin and tonic saying, which right winger do you want? Which one's going to give us the most tax cuts for our lifestyles? And I think that's a real danger to democracy, because I think there's a big debate going on outside Parliament and outside the bubble. Starmer's got to find himself a way out of the bubble and reconnect with people in all those red wall towns, working class communities, but middle class communities where we don't share all this rubbish that the Tories are putting.
And Mick, our debate has to end there, even though we could go on all night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Now, I'm not sure if either of you are aware of this, but you're actually starring in the season finale of this series of the Newscast TV show. It's going to be the summer holiday. Even though actually I'm not going on holiday, I'm carrying on working. So,
well,
as are all of us, all of us actually, because of all these blooming hustings, which is an important exercise in democracy.
Yes.
Anyway, so we thought we'd mark it by patting ourselves on the back with some of our best bits that have been on your TV screens with us.
Newscast from the BBC.
We need some of the world's greatest brains and minds fixed on trying to repair this planet, not trying to find the next place to go and live.
I think you're a bit nervous, Laura.
He keeps looking at me. I mean, I've interviewed some kind of unnerving people in my time.
Obviously, we must all obey the rules. On a human level, I'm just disappointed, really.
All those warnings and threats actually becoming real under the storm clouds of Stormont.
Yeah, the literal storm clouds, because Chris looks really wet in his Mac there.
On reflection, both Will Smith and me having our wives attacked, at least I didn't get up and slap anybody, which is good.
Laura, thank you for everything. I've absolutely loved sitting here with you, and I think all I want to say to you is that the best feeling in the world is making you laugh, because you work so hard, and it's really, I can see it's sometimes quite stressful.
And I was like, go on, Kirk. Sometimes he takes the emotion out of it and he puts the sort of strategic stuff in, and I think, no, put some more welly into it.
Oh no, Boris.
I can't believe I missed Lindsay Hoyle's parrot, because I had COVID.
Were you not there for it?
It really was quite amazing. Perched on the microphone there was Boris. It was, that was quite something. I'd forgotten some of those conversations we'd had. That pause from the Archbishop of Canterbury. We were meant to go there, weren't we, to Lambeth Palace, and there was a COVID concern, so we had to talk to him on Zoom or whatever. But the power of the pause.
Although I just remember that him admitting that admitting, because it sounded like a crime or something, he did jigsaws with the Queen at Sandringham.
I mean, you have had some
love that stuff.
You've had some brilliant people on. I mean, I don't want to be that too sycophantic about your programme, because, I'm allowed on it from time to time, and it's quite nice. But when you look back at it, you get some pretty big hitters, and you make some decent news lines. Future King, I mean, that was pretty good.
What was weird about
Were you nervous?
Well, what was weird about that day, and just watching it back again, is remembering that he was dressed really cash, and I ended up looking like the part-time prince,
like the Future King,
sort of jumper, like work shirt, proper shoes. I was like, oh.
Was it a bit nerve-wracking, just to pick up on what I said, seeing someone who, we've seen on the telly for all of our lives pretty much, and then suddenly, and you've not met before, and then he's there.
You'll laugh when you hear this. We had a little chat beforehand to get to know each other, and to break the ice, we talked about you being on Celebrity Mastermind.
That's like the go-to conversation for everything. I love that. It's always a mastermind chat.
Sat in Kensington Palace with Prince William talking about how well you were going to do, talking about the Yorkshire Dales.
Christmas said you are the official icebreaker.
I'm glad to be a regal icebreaker, Adam. I really am.
Yeah. Right, should we get out of this boiling hot studio?
Yes.
It's a heat wave in here. Thank you very much for watching and for listening and for keeping us company, and we look forward to keeping you company again. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Newscast from the BBC.